Welcome back to the channel. In this video you can see us working on our table saw. It's a Delta X5 unisaw with a 52-inch unifence, and it's something that I purchased in the 90s, sometime in the 90s, for my custom cabinet shop. It's what I did before I started doing this stuff. And when I sold the shop, I kept the saw. It's a nice tool, always something that I think every shop needs to have. But ours has just been sitting in the corner, just kind of going to waste, and we got a couple big woodworking projects coming up. So I thought there's no better time than the present to get this thing back in service, get it cleaned up, get it fixed up, get it ready to use. And honestly, it's a good addition to any shop. It's something that I've missed in our shop, even with the stuff that we do, and I'm excited to get it back in service, get it back going. And you get to follow us along. So here I'm just taking some WD-40 and some sandpaper on a block and knocking down any high spots. That cast iron, after it sits for a little while, it can get a little rough, get some rust spots on it. But this makes short work of it. This is something that I would probably have to do maybe once a year in the cabinet shop, especially if it got wet at all for any reason. I just take some WD-40, some sandpaper, some Scotch-Brite, and clean it up a little bit. That's exactly what we did here. Now I'm just taking some acetone, getting any leftover residue of that WD-40 off, just giving it a good wipe down. There's the unifence right there. See, it's a little bit dusty. That needs a cleaning too. The sight gauge there where you can set the dimensions, I don't know, for some reason it's all foggy, you can barely see it. I'm probably just gonna have to replace that, but for now it'll work. We'll make do. And there it is, that's the unisaw. So here I'm measuring out the right hand extend table. I'm going to make that out of 3/4 inch melamine, and I'm using this piece of poplar here that I'm going to band the two edges with it. That'll just give me someplace solid to screw into to hold that extended table down to the table saw itself, to the brackets on the table saw. This is here me marking out and using our Milwaukee 10-inch compound slide chop saw to cut that piece of melamine. Now, if the table saw was in service, I'd be using that for sure. So here I'm just marking the poplar to the melamine, and I'm going to use my biscuit joiner, cut some slots, throw some biscuits in there, glue it all together. You'll see me grab the brad nailer. I think I'm just shooting some 1¼ brads. Those are just going to kind of hold it all together until that glue dries and those biscuits are all dried up in that glue. Here I just put it up there and I'm checking it all out, make sure everything's going to line up with those brackets, see how well everything's going to work out. It's going to work out just fine. So I take the poplar, this one's laying on its edge, and do the same thing, lay it out for some biscuits, cut in those biscuits, glue it up, clamp it up, set it aside, let the glue dry. What I'm doing here is measuring it for a mobile base so we can roll this thing around. That's our little jack stand, if you will, to hold up these long pieces of steel. And here I'm going to make the base out of, this is 1¼ 1/8 inch angle iron, just something we had sitting around the shop. And I'm going to miter and 45 all the corners, weld it all together. And I gotta say, this slugger saw does a fantastic job at one, cutting the steel or aluminum or wood if we have to. And when we set up those angles like this 45, they just come out perfect. It's so nice. So here I'm just taking the angle grinder with the flap disc and cleaning up all the edges, smoothing them out, getting them ready to weld together. Here I just take the 4 pieces, lay them out, fit them up a little bit, get them ready to weld. You'll see me tack in the corners here, kind of put the whole thing together, and then when I'm done with that I go back and weld it out. Before I finish welding this thing out, I just cross tape it and check it for square. Like I said earlier, that slugger does such a good job with those 45s that just as soon as I tacked it up, it was perfectly square. I could finish welding this thing out. Here I'm thinking about and trying to decide what all do I want to weld out on this thing, because I want that saw to sit nice and flat inside of this cradle. Now I'm back with the grinder with the flap disc and just smoothing everything out, cleaning it all up. Now it's time to fit this thing. This saw is really heavy, but I'm able to manipulate it enough so I can get it in there. With the base underneath it now, at least for now, I can measure out the shelf that I'm going to put in there. And then take that right extend table and start assembling this thing. Start making it look like a table saw again. Here I'm just grabbing the 2 support legs, putting them underneath that right extend table, lowering them down to that base. I'm using this level, not as a level, but as a straight edge, so it's nice and flat. This floor in our shop is not anything close to level. We call it sort of flat, and we're being really generous when we say that. So that's just me just adjusting the legs. They have extended little feet on them, and using that level at the straight edge. Here I'm just attaching the top of the legs to that table, using a big square, just squaring them up. best I can. Just kind of eyeballing them, really. They don't need that much. We'll square it all up later. Here, just taking a block of some sandpaper and knocking down the edges. Now I put the unifence back on and I have to adjust the height of it. There's really 3 adjustments on the height of this thing. And I just got to mess around with it and tweak it a little bit and get it all right to make it so it's nice and smooth. You can see here I grabbed the micro adjustment tool and knocked it into place. There it is. Nice. Works good. Here I grabbed the new insert, put it in there, fire it up, make the first cut. Just like old times. Now I'm going to cut that bottom shelf, so I move that fence out to the right, double check it with the tape. It's exactly right on. So I'm going to cut the shelf off the length and then cut it down the width. I know that gauge for the dimension is dead on, so I just move the fence over, put it where I want it, lock it down, make my cut, and I know it's going to be perfect. And there it is. It's perfect. These are the casters that we got for it. Just measuring up. Gonna make a drawing in Fusion so we can cut the plates out. We'll weld the plates to the mobile base and then bolt these casters to that. So here it is, Fusion 360, just making a simple plate with 4 holes for these casters. You'll see me draw it out and then make some copies. We'll have 4 of them. We ended up with 5, spoiler alert, but you'll see that later on. And then we cut them out. That simple. Here I'm in the manufacturing part and just simulating the cuts, make sure everything gets cut. I write the post it. That's the G code. And there's the machine going to work. It'll cut out all 4. Back to our table. We use our magnetic clamp on this side of the table. Clamp these little guys down, use the angle grinder and clean them all up, get them all ready for weld. Run them through the drill press real quick, clean up those holes. Make sure they're nice and perfect. And then this happened. Here I'm just laying out those plates for those casters, and I'm going to weld them to the bottom of this frame. Now I decided I wanted an intermediate piece just on the outside edge of that table saw. So I'm taking another piece of that same angle iron, cutting it. I'll mark the edges out so we can notch it so that can sit in there nice and flush. I'll trim it, get it notched, put it back in the frame and weld that in there too. So I just got it tapped in place there. Now I'm just tacking it and welding it up. I thought this was going to add some stability to the base itself, which it did. And it also gave me another place to add another caster, which you'll see in the next video. Here I'm just bolting casters on with those plates that we made. If we ever have a problem, one of these casters breaks, or we decide to change the height, which we might, it's just a simple operation of unbolting these ones or the old one and bolting on a new one. That saw is going to sit down inside this base, and it has kind of a lip on the bottom of it. So I'm cutting off those ends of those bolts, the long ends, and just grinding them smooth. This video was so long I decided to make it into 2 parts, so we're wrapping up part 1 here. Part 2 will come next week. We'll see you guys back then. Thanks for watching.